Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of V for Veganism. I am here with Philip Murphy of Dharma Voices for Animals. Philip, let's take it back to the beginning. What is Buddhism and how did you find your way towards it?
When the Buddha was asked, what is your practice about, what is Buddhism? He said, essentially, Buddhism is suffering and the end of suffering. So seeing into the nature of suffering, the way that we are deluded by our untrained minds to believe things that are not necessarily true and cause us to suffer. So to acknowledge that and then to adopt a way of life that's ethical and practical to live a happy life. My experience of Buddhism is as an experiential philosophy. It's not really a religion, and by that I mean there's not a lot of ritual and ceremony that are required to be considered a practicing Buddhist. It's more about a way of seeing the world clearly, seeing the causes of suffering, and adopting a way of life that ends suffering. So it's very practical.
Yes. Were you religious before?
I was raised Roman Catholic. I came to practice in my native Boston. A friend brought me to the Cambridge Insight Meditation Center, which is one of the leading urban non-residential centers in the Insight tradition. So there are three main schools of Buddhism, Theravada, Zen, and Tibetan. And the Theravada school features a form of meditation called Vipassana, which translates as insight. So we're at the Insight Meditation Center of New York. The New York Insight Meditation Center is a urban, non-residential center for the practice of insight meditation, which again is in the Theravada Buddhist tradition. Vipassana is the word in Pali, the language of the Buddha. It's retreats and instruction on Buddhist practice, day-long retreats, non-residential, a lot of programming around various Buddhist applications to life, for lack of a better way to say it. Community groups around, there's a people of color Sangha, LGBTQI Sangha, a recovery Sangha, and we created an Echo Sangha, and that was born of a online course that has become quite popular in the Buddhist community. It's run by an organization in Washington, D.C., nonprofit called One Earth Sangha. So it's a Buddhist response to environmental challenges.
Maybe this is kind of obvious, but were you vegan before Buddhism or after?
Interestingly for me, it essentially at the same time in my life experience, I came to first vegetarianism and Dharma practice. I happened upon a display. It was the Boston Vegetarian Society, and I was walking by the Boston Common, and it was all of 3 card tables with flyers and pamphlets. And I guess on some level, like most people, I knew that animals were killed to eat the food, but to see the information, to learn about the processes in factory farming was just really an awakening. At that point, I stopped eating meat, and as I continued to learn about the practices of animal agriculture around eggs and dairy, I eventually came to eliminate all animal products from my diet, and that's been about 6 years.
Something that I actually have an issue with is meditation. Not that I take issue with meditation, I just have a hard time with meditation. What is the importance of meditation, especially in 2017, especially in New York City, this fast-paced life that we live?
So my experience of meditation, as I mentioned briefly before, it's a way of learning to be present to my lived experience. A lot of the suffering I've come to learn through meditation practice that I created myself by worrying about remorse for the past, worrying about what happened in the past, being anxious about the future. So to be able to be fully present and see, I mean, I'm sitting here with you, everything is fine. I have things happening around, a busy evening tonight at the center here. We're hosting an event. But that's not happening right now. And by having developed the skill of being present to my lived experience, I reduce my suffering and I'm able to be in the world more skillfully and cause less harm by making unskillful choices that lead to suffering for myself and others.
Okay,
interesting. Yes. Very effective. I think the point I keep coming back to is it's a very pragmatic way of being in the world as opposed to a religious practice that relies on ritual and ceremony.
There is a film that was put out, Animals and the Buddha, and in the film they talk about different kind of schools of thought in terms of eating animals. And I guess one school would say not at all, not byproduct, nothing, and then there is the other school that teaches that if it wasn't meant for you, it's okay to eat it. Am I getting that totally wrong?
Not totally wrong. No, and this is one of the interesting aspects of this tradition, which is the Theravada tradition. So Mahayana translates as the great vehicle, because the people who created the terminology, they called their tradition the great vehicle. So that's Zen Buddhism and Tibetan. So they're together Mahayana. Hinayana, which is the lesser vehicle, again, marketing coup on the part of the people who came up with this terminology, practice in Zen and Tibetan. So in the Mahayana tradition, the teachings on the relationship to animals is very clear. It's not permitted in any way. In Theravada, there's a sutta or scripture that focuses on the relationship of monks who subsist. They don't have any resources, they don't own anything, they don't touch money, they subsist by alms rounds. So they have a begging bowl and they go and they receive alms from the community. And the Buddha was asked, if a wandering mendicant, a monk, receives in his begging bowl meat, is it okay to eat it? And he said, if the monk knows that, if the monk has not seen, heard, or does not believe that the animal was killed for him, that it would be okay. So if there would be no increase in suffering because it's about taking what's offered. Right. So what's interesting, so that's people will use that as a loophole to justify eating meat, when in fact, I mean, it's an exception to a rule made for wandering mendicants, for monks. Right. So in terms of the Buddhist context, kind of the key operating principles are the two wings of the bird, as they will say, of Buddhism is wisdom and compassion. So it's really about, in our relationship with all sentient beings, and non-human animals are explicitly included in the moral universe of Buddhism, which is fairly unique among world religions. It's very explicit. So boundless compassion for all sentient beings. And the cornerstone in terms of ethical behavior is the Pali term is ahimsa, which is non-harming. So boundless compassion, all sentient beings, avoid harming. So that's really the context of a Buddhist approach to being in the world in relationship with all sentient beings.
And that, yes, and that makes a lot more sense to me anyway. Explain to us a little bit about Dharma Voices for the Animals and how it came about and your role
Sure.
along with it.
Yes. So Dharma Voices for Animals is the only nonprofit Buddhist animal advocacy group in the world. It was founded by a gentleman by the name of Bob Isaacson, one of the co-founders and the current president. And it was generated by just practicing in these communities, intuitively, understanding that all sentient beings deserve compassion, and that we don't need to eat animal products to survive. In fact, it's detrimental to our health and the environment. It's essentially advocating for animals within the Buddhist community, because despite the teachings being, to my mind, very clear, there's a lot of people who do consume animal products in the Buddhist community globally. So it's really about raising awareness and presenting the case for animals in the context of the teachings.
Okay.
We're actually very excited. I was on the phone with Bob, our president, earlier. He and I and a small group of folks are going to Sri Lanka in October to stage the second annual Buddhist Animal Rights Conference that Dharma Voices for Animals sponsors. And we have a strong presence in Sri Lanka. The Buddha was Indian. But there were times of interruption, but in Sri Lanka, which is a small island off the southeast coast of India, it has remained in continuous practice for 2,300 years. So we have a very strong presence there, and DVA is actually launching their first in-country presence with an office in Sri Lanka this fall. So we're really excited about that. In third world countries, there still is some subsistence farming and, animal agriculture as it was practiced thousands of years ago, which is so different from the way that we know animal agriculture to be in the West, as factory farming and the horrors of CAFOs and all the things that we know about, too much about. It's just awful stuff, as we know. Non-industrialized countries and communities, there's this, this is still considered an acceptable practice, but they're becoming rarer and rarer, and it's about really acknowledging that this is not, to borrow a phrase from Melanie Joy, normal, natural, and necessary to do this. And it's going contrary to culture and conditioning. I was raised in a culture in 20th century America where it's accepted that meat is part of the diet. Meat, eggs, dairy. So it's about not only raising awareness of the truth of the matter, which is that these animals suffer and die needlessly for us to consume them as food or clothing, entertainment, for any reason. It's unnecessary, it's detrimental to our health, but there's a tradition of this happening for hundreds of years, if not thousands. And so it's raising awareness about this is not necessary. We basically brought a scientific approach to look at this from an objective standpoint and realize we don't need to do this, and it's causing harm. So really educating people about this. And I've seen in the last few years a tremendous shift. I'm seeing an awareness that has been coming, I think, for a long time, incredibly gratifying. People are just realizing, wow, I don't need to eat animals to be healthy. In fact, I'm probably healthier if I don't. And that's strictly the health piece. Raising awareness around environment, in addition to foundationally for me, in my way of being in the world, is ethics. That this is not in keeping with my ethical beliefs in the way that I want to be in the world. That's the cornerstone.
Philip, thank you so much for doing this interview. We very much appreciate it. We're going to go to our party that we're having and our screening. Please go check out Dharma Voices for the Animals, and also watch the film Animals and the Buddha. You can find them both online very easily. And come check out the New York Insight Meditation Center.
Yes.
I'm Philip again, thank you, and make sure to subscribe below, and we'll catch you